Well, hello, welcome to the channel. My name's Johnny, and you're watching Hillbilly Modeling. Now, this is going to be part 5 of our Trumpeter Russian SAM-6 anti-aircraft missile vehicle. It's also in 1/35 scale, just in case you hadn't seen the other videos. And in this video, we're going to prep everything for painting and start painting. So, see how far we get with that. So, we got a lot to do, so let's jump down to the bench and get started with it. All right, so first thing we need to do is disassemble the model. Now, this is the way we left it in our last video. So we do need to take the missiles off and get our launcher off the top of the vehicle. Now, we do have our cables, and if you remember from the video, I left these where we could remove them. So we'll get those off and paint those separately. So one of the little things that we need to take care of are these hoses that goes on the back of our launcher. We had trouble with that during our build, so we're going to go ahead and take care of that now. And it looks to be about 18 millimeters, and I've got it in the raised position because that's how I am going to display our vehicle. It's just at 20 millimeters, which is what the instructions want us to cut these at. It's just too long when we actually raise the launchers into the launch position. So we're going to go ahead and trim about 2 millimeters off of them there. Now, Trumpeter's given us these springs here to slide over top of our tubing to give it more of a realistic look there for the type of hoses that are on the vehicle. And we just want to be careful and not have a repeat where we had a problem of actually breaking those glue joints loose there. That's the reason why I went ahead and trimmed off that extra 2 millimeters there. Shorten them up a bit so it's not so much binding on these lines that we're putting in. They were just kind of too long there at 20 millimeters. Now, for some reason, the spring just does not want to kind of even itself out along the length of that tube. So we're just going to take our hobby knife here and just kind of try to stretch it down along that. I'm probably ruining the edge on my knife. But we got more blades. It'll be all right. But we'll get it. There we go. That's what it's supposed to look like. So, yeah. On to the next step. So one of the problems we did have during our build process of the lower hull here is when we went to fit our road wheels on, we had our 3-center road wheel arms, or I should say the road wheel arms without the dampeners on them, on each side. We had to kind of sand that down to get them to fit the road wheels. So they're going to be really tight. So I am going to protect those from paint by masking those over. And also for some parts, I do like to use the low tack type masking tape to help hold parts. That way I can paint them and then flip them later. And the parts that we're putting on right now, these are the extra links for our tracks because for some reason when you do link and length tracks, you may find that you might have a gap after you get everything painted up and you go to do your final assembly. So we're going to want to make sure that we paint these extra links up, one for the left and one for the right, at the same time that we do our tracks. And then for our road wheels and idlers and drive sprockets, I do use some tapered dowel here. And just simple little pencil sharpener. Sharpen a piece of dowel, and then that works really good for holding our road wheels and other small items. So now this is the color we're going to use this is that German Panzer Gray primer. We're going to use this to prime the entire vehicle. And then, of course, I will have to thin that out a little bit. And I'm going to use the Vallejo airbrush thinner for that. And this is a water-based acrylic paint that we are using. So before we start spraying, though, I almost forgot to prime our metal parts. And we're going to go ahead and use this Mr. Primer and brush this on. Now, this is our tow cable that goes onto the front of the vehicle. just this stuff dries extremely thin. You just need to get it on there and get it to cover those parts. Same thing with any of our photo etch that's on the vehicle itself. Here, of course, this is the saw that we have that we made up, and we need to prime that. Give the primer and the paint the best opportunity it can to stick to these metal parts. So, on to priming. We won't spend a lot of time talking about spraying, except for the fact that when you first put water-based acrylics onto the raw plastic, you just need to get it misted on. Kind of get that first little base coat on there, because as that dries, that's really going to help with the application of the rest of that color and get that really built up. And as you can see, it will, after it dries, you can come back and you can layer it on and get that color depth that you need. But you got to get that first little light coat on there, or it doesn't really want to go on very well. So here we are with our launcher. That's all primed up, and we have our vehicle primed up too, and that came out really nice. That was a really good primer coat there. I got a little piece of dust on there or something. So, but it came out really smooth, and so that looks good. Now I also primed up with that German dark gray the nozzle ends of our missiles, just so that, you know, it would be kind of black up inside there. So for our missiles, we're going to actually prime the outside of these missiles a different color, which is going to be that Vallejo primer gray. And I have thinned it just a little bit for my airbrush. Now you have to do that to taste to make sure that you get it to flow good through your airbrush. And I'm just going to take some larger tapered dowels here and be very careful. And we'll put that into the exhaust nozzle to hold our missiles. So that should make it much easier to paint. So on to spraying on our primer. Now, since we are spraying a gray primer onto a gray plastic, polystyrene, it's kind of hard to see exactly if you're getting too much on there, and you might end up with runs. So be very cautious when you're doing this. Otherwise, you'll have to buff out some runs before you can go back and go to painting whatever colors you're actually going to be painting onto the missiles. And the reason why I'm using this light gray is because I do want these missiles to be very distinctive in color, different than the vehicle itself. And by changing our actual primer coat color, it's going to affect the final color. So next up, we need to look at our tracks. So for that, I'm going to use this craft paint here, and that's Rust. And it is a water-based acrylic, and if you guys have been watching the channel, you know I like these. So we're going to paint our tracks up with this craft paint Rust. Now, this is just the first step. So, I mean, we've already got it primed in the dark gray, so we don't have to be super careful with making sure that everything's colored in, you know, and nice and even. We're just laying down just a base rust coat here, and we'll do that for the upper sections of the tracks along with the lower sections as well. And like I say, if it's a little bit splotchy, that's okay. That's fine. You know, that'll help add character to our tracks. So next up, we're going to do a little bit of pre-shading, and we're going to be using white for that. And again, we're back to craft paints. And of course, it is thinned for my specific airbrush. And when you go to thin any kind of paint, the rule of thumb is about the consistency of milk. I'm assuming it's 2% milk because that's what I drink. So, first thing up, the nose cones here on our missiles are white. So while we're doing our pre-shading, we're going to go ahead and paint the tips of our missiles along with that, so that'll have plenty of time to dry. And then, sorry about the shaking camera, I've run my head into it. But here we're just doing some the center fill method here in pre-shading, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay, just kind of doing the center sections here of some of the higher items that have more relief. Kind of look at it like the parts that are closer to the sun, maybe, yeah. Just in case you don't know exactly what you want to use the pre-shading on. And I do have that one splotch there. For some reason, me and white, we never get along. So, but that's okay. We're going to fade that splotch out when we put our base coat on of our actual color. So this is the color that we're going to be using, or trying to match, I should say. And it kind of looks more like a olive green, or at least the olive green that I have. And again, it is a craft paint, and it's actually a pretty good match. So I don't think we're going to have to do any real mixing of this paint. We're going to have a lot of actual tonal variation since we're putting it onto a dark primer base with that pre-shading. So we should get some interesting kind of color deviations there. And here we're doing our road wheels first, as you can see, and I did do the pre-shading there on the center of those, and I also pre-shaded the center of our drive sprocket. And it's okay, just shoot the paint on one even coat and keep going to the next part, the next part, the next part. Don't try to get complete color saturation in your first coat, because we just want to build this up slowly so that we're not really going in and totally obliterating the pre-shading that we've already done. If we get too much color on there, our pre-shading will disappear, and then we're going to lose that little magic that actually happens when you're doing your pre-shading. So for the sake of the video, I keep switching back and forth between parts, but I'm just going to show you the hull. We're going to lay down the first coat, and then we'll come back and kind of darken in with the next coat, and then we'll move on to a different part and do the same thing for it. So you're kind of switching back and forth between your road wheels and your launcher and the hull itself, just trying to make sure that the darks and the lights all kind of match up, you know. Does that sound a little difficult to understand? Maybe. Sometimes my communication skills are not the best. But as you make a good pass, switch out to another part and make a good pass on it. That way we're not overpainting some of our sections, like our launcher, and underpainting our hull, and we'd have a terrible mismatch there. So I hope that I'm okay there in trying to describe how that process needs to go. So when I'm doing this, the rule of thumb I always use is that if it looks like it needs one more coat, I need to stop right there, because I'm starting to get too much color saturation, which is going to kind of wipe out our pre-shading, and we don't want to do that. So let's do a little color chart check here. We'll take our painting and marking guide here and check our green, and really it's not a bad match. Really it isn't, because it's a little hard comparing with a glossy paint guide, but yeah, that's not too bad. So now we're going back in with that German Panzer Gray, and we're going to paint in the lenses that are on our infrared projectors. And in the daylight, they just look like black headlights, to be honest with you, that's really what they look like. So, and we're just substituting the Panzer Gray for the black, so that it's not too deep of a black color there. Of course, you could use flat black too. That doesn't matter. And I'm also going to use that same Panzer Gray to go in and color in our, what do you call these things? Periscopes. Yeah. Now, the only problem with doing our periscopes is that Trumpeter has molded in the little lens wipers, kind of like windshield wipers for your periscope, right onto the part. So, which is good because we don't have that little bitty part to have to install, but it does cause us a little bit of trouble there painting around those. Now we're going to use the exact same color. As you can see, we haven't switched that color up at all. And we're going to use that Panzer Gray again, just to blacken in, or gray in. That's probably a better description there, of all the metal parts that are on our tools. So we've done the axe. Now I'm doing the shovel. Sorry, that's a really good picture of my knuckle in the way there. But what this is going to do is I find that the Panzer Gray gives us a really good base for doing some dry brushing. And as you can see here, we also have our saw to do. And since the vehicle, it's easier to paint if you're not holding the vehicle. So I'm using this box, just a cut-off cardboard box, to kind of elevate my hand up to the right painting angle. And we'll just paint in the saw as well. Now, if you notice, I'm not doing the lower edge at all because that is actually part of the bracket that holds the saw to the side of the vehicle, and it covers up the actual saw teeth. So we don't want to paint that. That needs to remain green along with the rest of the vehicle. And we're just painting in our acrylic here right over top of that. And that will prep it there for our dry brushing, which we're going to do later on. So now we're going to move on to the cradles for holding the missiles during in the transport position. It does have these 3 pads in each one of these cradles that I'm assuming is rubber. I don't know that for sure, but we do want a little bit of distinction here, kind of help bring these details out. So I'm painting these with that same German dark Panzer Gray, and kind of give it the look of rubber, I hope. But it'll just give us definitely a look of something that's different. So, now we'll move on to reasserting the color for the rubber tires. And this is the road wheel, of course. And it does have overspray. Now you can get away with masks and stuff like that and not have to come in and do this. But I find it just as easy to come in and paint. And luckily these road wheels have a high enough or distinctive enough ridge around them that we can just flow that Panzer Gray right around. Now, it's important to mention that the Panzer Gray that we're using is the same one that is mixed up for the airbrush. So it really does flow very easily. So next up, we're going to take this German dark yellow, and any kind of sand color or buff or anything like that will work just fine for the purpose that we're going to use it for here. And that's going to be to paint the wooden handles on our tools. So here I'm just starting with the axe handle. And here probably it would have been better had I left these tools off and painted them separately, because the handle of this axe does go up underneath our shovel. So that's something that I'm just going to have to deal with since I've already attached them to the vehicle. So what this is going to do is give us a base for a little bit of a weathering technique that we're going to use later on to make this, or at least try, to make this look more like wood, not so much like just painted plastic. So it doesn't have to look perfect, but we do want to make sure that we don't get it on the green on our vehicle. And as you can see there, we've got our handles painted up there. And don't forget the handles on the saw as well, because we need to do those. So next up, I'm going to use a little bit of that flat rust that we sprayed our track sections with. And this is the airbrush mixture. And I'm just going over the heat shield a little bit here. You don't have to go all the way to the edges. As a matter of fact, it's probably better that we don't go to the edges of the shield. Just to show where the heat's been coming through, and then there's been a little bit of rust there. And we'll do a little bit more rusting there later on. So next up, I'm going to take our base color, which is our olive green, and I'm going to darken it up with just a little bit of black. I really want this to be a little bit different green. A dark green's fine, you know, a medium green's fine. We just don't want it to match the same color of the vehicle. And the reason why is because we're going to use this to paint those bottles that's on the back of the vehicle. So to get it to flow a little bit better, I put a little bit of airbrush thinner in there so that these craft paints will actually flow better for us when we go to paint. So here are the tanks that we're talking about, and it's some sort of compressed gas, obviously for the missile system, and it could be a smoke generator. I wouldn't think that that's what that is, but we're gonna go ahead and paint these bottles up. And I am being careful not to paint the straps that mount them to the vehicle, because I want that to be the same color as the vehicle there. Next up, we're going to do a little bit of silver here. Now this is that flat steel, and it is an enamel color. We'll be using that for dry brushing later on, but I just want these fittings for our tanks to kind of pop just a little bit, just stand out just somewhat. And of course, this is going to get dulled down somewhat later on. Since we've got that flat steel out, now's a good time to take a look at our drive sprockets. And anywhere where they're going to actually make contact with the track is going to be a kind of a bare metal look. So we're going to just go ahead and paint those up. There we go. Now don't forget to do the drive sprocket on the inside as well. And then we're going to go ahead and turn our attention to the idlers because these are pressed metal steel, and of course they're going to be they're not going to have any paint or anything on them there. There is no rubber for it. And there are these little recessed areas where the guide teeth are going to make contact with it. So we're going to touch those up too a little bit. Give them just a little bit of shininess there. And it's always good to take the parts and, you know, when you mate them to the actual tracks and stuff, to look where those contact areas are so you kind of get a good idea of the shiny spots that you need to put on them there. So that looks good. Now, we don't want to forget about the back side either. We need to go ahead and take care of that. So while I'm thinking about it, we need to go ahead and prep our oil paint. Now this is Artist Oil Paint, Burnt Umber. We're going to be using that on our tools to simulate wood. And we're going to put that on over top of that German dark yellow there. If I can get the top off of it. So, the thing about oil paints is they have linseed oil in them. So I'm going to see if I've got a lot of linseed oil that wants to come out of the tube, and it doesn't seem to be. So we're just going to take this and put it on a piece of cardboard. Don't need very much because we don't have that much wood to do. And as you can see, how shiny it is, well, that's that linseed oil, which is the carrier for these artist oil pigments. And we're going to set that aside and let that leach out, the linseed oil leach out. So now we're going to do some highlight colors, some post shading actually. And this is our base olive green, and then we've got yellow. What is that? Daffodil yellow, I think, or bright yellow. And we're going to mix these together. And the reason why I'm using yellow to lighten up our green for an accent or chipping color is because if we use white, the green will come out a little bit chalky looking. And we don't want it to look chalky. We want it to stay into the same scheme of the yellow that we have going on already. So I'm going to put a little bit of yellow in there, and we'll mix that up really good and see what color we come up with. And the important thing to remember here is when these paints dry, they are going to darken a little bit. And because of that, you need to be just a little bit lighter than the color that you're searching for. So we need an accent color, a color we can do highlights with, and post shading, and that actually kind of looks pretty good. I think we'll be able to use that, no problem. So in order to help with the painting portion so that it goes on nice and smooth, I am just going to put a couple of drops there of that airbrush thinner. And that'll kind of thin it out just a little bit. And if it thins out just a little bit too much, it just means we need to go over the areas we want highlighted a second time, which is okay because it kind of gives us a gradient there. And it keeps us from making it way too light. We don't want to do that. So I'm starting off here doing the highlights, and we are going to do... Now, this is actually post shading. So let me zoom in there so you can see what I'm doing. With a small brush going in, we're going to take care of these fasteners here a little bit. So we'll hit all the fasteners, also probably the hinges, you know, any bolt detail that we have on the vehicle. And it looks bright now, but as it dries, it's going to actually get a little bit darker, and that's okay. But we can use it too to take care of these edges. And by going along all these edges, it helps to really make them pop and make them more distinctive and stand out from the side of the vehicle. So we'll go along the side of the vehicle here and take care of all these little rain water troughs or guards, or that's mostly what they're there for, is to keep water from getting down inside of all these hatches and covers and access panels. So just go along the edge there, and like I say, if it dries a little bit, then and it's too dark, we can go back in over top of it there and really dial in the look that we're trying to get to here. Now, when it comes to the launcher, we've got these really nice covers here on the side that have these stiffener pressed metal pieces that are on them there to stiffen them up. And it's really going to help to bring those details out by using this highlighting here. This is post shading. I keep saying highlighting, but I really mean post shading, because that's really what we're doing here. We're just going to shade these a little bit lighter so that they're actually visible and they don't blend in with the rest of the paint job, which is really going to add to the detail in the end anyway for us. So that's the goal anyway. So while I'm doing this, and it is a water-based acrylic, of course, so it's going to kind of want to dry in the brush some. So you do need to clean your brush fairly frequently, just a little bit of water because it is water-based paint, and then go back into your highlighting and catch all that bolt detail and all that. Here we're doing these stiffener ribs that's on the front of the vehicle. This is the kind of the underside, the lower hull, and so we'll do those as well. And we can use this exact same color and kind of add scratch detail, just to show some abrasion there, to keep that paint from being so even. A little bit of, what do you call it, visual interest. that's what we're trying to do here. And I'm not going to do the whole bottom of the vehicle because this vehicle is not going to be, you're really not going to see the bottom of it. But of course, I mean, you could go ahead and do the entire bottom if you wanted to, and it's good practice. So next up, as you can see, how just highlighting those little areas there really makes these covers and these access doors kind of pop, along with the bolt detail. Keeps it from being rather bland. We don't want that because we want our model to be seen, so that's the idea here. Okay, back to our flat steel tester's enamel here. We've used this before. Now we're just going to do some dry brushing. So we need to unload most of the paint that's on our brush, and I'm using a very small brush in this case because of the area where we're going to be working. So we're kind of going back to our tools right now, and we're going to work on the edges that would be shiny as if these tools were actually being used. And we're just going to dry brush that on. Now later on we're going to come in with some thinner and actually do some blending right on the edges, but for now we just need to get some paint onto the actual tools, and just place this in areas where you know, like along edges, and then any edge or surface area that's going to come in contact with the ground, like on this spade shovel. And then we can come in with a little bit of thinner and do some blending and kind of get it to fade around the edges a little bit. Need to do a little bit of practice with this if you're not used to doing it. But yeah, that's kind of a metal look there. So that's going to look really nice when we get done with our weathering. And of course we got the same effect that we need to do with our saw blade, just to show that this blade's actually being used. So kind of think of it like as this saw cuts through a log, which direction is these streaks going to go? You know, what kind of wear are you going to have? And it's going to be kind of hit and miss because I imagine these blades are not that precisely made. After I get the flat steel on there, I'm coming back in with some thinner and kind of fading it, and then taking off any excess that's on there. And then later on, when we get some rust effects and stuff on there, it's going to look great. Okay, back to our artist oil paint. This is that burnt umber, and you can see that nice oil ring around it. So it's actually been sitting there for a couple of hours. We're going to use this Tester's enamel thinner for a carrier, which works really good. Just going to take our small brush, because we are painting on really small pieces, and we're just going to kind of get us a little slurry going there, that artist oil, and we just need to get our pigment on there. And very carefully targeting that German dark yellow that we use as our base. And I mean, you don't have to use the paints specifically that I use. You can use whatever colors that you have. Just remember that a light blonde wood color works good as a base. And then whatever oil paint that you choose, I found that the burnt umber tends to work really good for me. Okay, so for our elevation mechanism here, which is just a toothed rail and an arc here, and I imagine there's some motor and gear that drives it. The contact area where the motor makes contact with this, this tooth section, actually needs to be probably a little bit shiny, so we're going to dry brush that too with the flat steel enamel that we used earlier. I know I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. I kind of do things sometimes as I think about them. But now, since we already have that flat steel out, again, I'm going to go ahead and take care of our tracks. So with steel tracks, you know, the parts that doesn't really get metal-to-metal contact, we got our rust on. But for those parts that do get metal-to-metal contact, we're going to need to dry brush a little bit of that flat steel on there. Kind of make them just a little bit shiny. Now, there are some modelers that prefer just to use graphite on this, and that's fine. And actually, you could do both. And we may actually do that on this one. But here, we're just taking care of the guide teeth. And because of the way this vehicle works, we're going to do the guide teeth on both sides, on the inside and outside of the guide teeth, because when it goes through the drive sprocket, it's going to get the outside of the edges, and then when it goes between the road wheels, it's going to get the inside. So, of course, we have our contact area where we're making contact with the ground. So that metal is going to be a little bit polished there. And we're just going to dry brush that on to the outside of these track shoes. And you can see I am picking up excess paint just off that little piece of paper towel or napkin to actually get it to spread as much as possible without it being, I mean, we call it dry brushing for a reason, which means that it doesn't flow very well. And we don't want it to flow, we just want it to catch the highlights. Now, we don't want to forget those extra track shoes that we made up, just in case we need them. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and take care of those too. And if we find that we need to actually insert those when we install our tracks, we'll have those ready. So now that we've had some time for that enamel to dry, you can see that I've gotten some of that flat steel there on our bracket that holds our shovel down. And any other brackets that we have that we may have messed up a little bit, we can go ahead and touch those up now. Well, all right, that's going to have to do it for this video, but we got a lot done. I went ahead and put the launcher on, just so we can kind of get an idea of what's going on. And you can see how we've kind of integrated that post shading along with our pre-shading to really kind of bring out the details on our launcher there, and the vehicle, of course. And of course, we got a little bit of dry brushing done, and we got our tracks all painted up so that they'll be in good shape for weathering and all that. So yeah, that was a lot to do. Got a lot more to do. So that'll be in part 6. We still got to paint our missiles up. Got to get all of that done. Well, hopefully we'll be able to go ahead and do some weathering and stuff and maybe finish it up in the next video. So kind of looking forward to that. So you guys look out for that video. That'll be coming up next Friday. So you guys stay safe, and I'll see you then.